excessive vehicles lowering neighborhood appeal. That's what the violation slip on my windshield said, printed in bold like a traffic ticket from the universe's pettiest police force. I stood there in my own driveway, morning sun glaring off the neon orange paper, while across the street, Linda, the self-appointed general of our HOA, lifted her coffee mug in triumph. She didn't even try to hide her smirk. The neighbors watched through parted blinds, probably glad the beast was chewing on someone else for once. Let me tell you, nothing ruins the smell of fresh coffee and cut grass like a piece of paper accusing you of lowering community standards, especially when you know it's a setup, because here's the thing Linda doesn't know. Those cars lined along the curb, the ones she photographs on her nightly patrols, they don't belong to random freeloaders. They belong to tenants. My tenants. Every one of those leases runs through me and every monthly rent check lands in my account. Linda thinks she's policing the neighborhood. What she doesn't realize is that she's standing in the middle of a chessboard I own. But before we get to the mic drop moment, let me rewind. The HOA has always been Linda's empire. She struts around with a clipboard like it's a badge, quoting bylaw numbers the way preachers quote scripture. If your grass dares to grow higher than 3 inches, you'll wake up to a warning taped to your door. If you leave a holiday decoration up past her arbitrary cutoff date, you'll find a strongly worded email in your inbox. She thrives on power, and the board, mostly her hand-picked allies, backs her every move. The latest crusade? Parking. 2 weeks before my violation slip, Linda sent out a newsletter written in her signature passive-aggressive italics. Some residents appear to be disregarding community parking policies. Excessive vehicles clutter our streets and degrade our neighborhood's appeal. She went on to remind everyone that each household was limited to 2 vehicles per driveway, no overnight street parking, and absolutely no commercial vehicles. It sounded official. It even looked official. But when I dug out my copy of the HOA bylaws, all I found was a vague line about avoiding nuisance parking. No numbers, no overnight bans, nothing enforceable, but Linda was banking on no one checking. So when I came out that morning and found the orange slip slapped on my car, I knew she'd crossed the line from annoying into dangerous. She was manufacturing rules, daring me to fight back. I crumpled the slip in my hand and crossed the street. Linda stood there in her robe, coffee steaming, satisfaction radiating off her like heat from asphalt. "Morning," I said. She smiled like a cat. "Morning. I see you got your notice." "Oh, I got it." I held up the crushed paper. "What exactly is the violation here?" "Too many cars," she said breezily. "Our community standard is 2 per household. You've clearly exceeded that." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I don't recall reading that standard in the bylaws." Her smile faltered for half a second. "It's implied." "Implied isn't binding, Linda." Her nostrils flared. "Look, people are complaining. Your cars are making the street look like a used car lot. It lowers property values." "Are people complaining?" I asked. "Or are you complaining?" That earned me the death glare. She set her mug down on the hood of her SUV, leaned in, and lowered her voice. "You might think you can get away with ignoring the rules, but the board has teeth. We can fine you. We can lien your property." I almost laughed, but instead I just nodded. "We'll see." That's when I decided, if Linda wanted a war, I'd give her one. But I wasn't going to swing wildly. I'd play it smart. I'd let her dig her own grave with her arrogance. Over the next week, I started collecting. I asked tenants to forward me every letter, every slip, every warning she left on their cars. I kept copies of the newsletters. I even photographed her as she marched down the street, jotting license plates in her little notebook. The more evidence I gathered, the clearer it became. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was inventing them. Meanwhile, the neighborhood atmosphere grew tense. You could feel it in the way people lingered at the mailbox, whispering about Linda's patrols. You could see it in the extra cars suddenly hidden in garages or driven 2 blocks away just to avoid her wrath. She had everyone spooked. Everyone except me. The turning point came at the next board meeting. The clubhouse smelled of carpet cleaner and burnt coffee as always. Folding chairs scraped against the linoleum floor as neighbors shuffled in. Linda sat at the head of the table, binder stacked high with evidence. She opened the meeting with her usual pomp. "Tonight," she declared, "we'll be voting on a new parking enforcement policy. To preserve our property values, households will be limited to 2 registered vehicles. Any extras will incur monthly fees." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people muttered in agreement, others shook their heads. I raised my hand. "Question." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Yes." "What happens if the vehicles belong to tenants? Tenants with leases that explicitly guarantee parking rights?" She froze for just a beat too long. "Then the homeowner is responsible." "Good," I said, standing. My folder of documents felt heavy in my hand, the weight of checkmate. "Because in case you haven't noticed, most of those cars belong to tenants renting from me. Which means every single violation, every single fee, every single threat, you've been directing them at me." A murmur rolled through the room. Heads turned, whispers spread. Linda blinked. "That doesn't exempt you." "No," I said, smiling, "but it does mean you've picked a fight with the one person in this neighborhood who actually owns every house on the block." The room erupted. Gasps, chatter, disbelief. Linda's face went pale, then red. She opened her binder, closed it, opened it again. "And me?" I just sat down, calm as ever, letting the silence after my words settle like dust, because this was only the beginning. Linda thought she'd cornered me with one orange slip. What she didn't realize was that she'd just handed me the perfect opening to take her whole board apart piece by piece. "Touch that car, and you're paying the tow bill." The words cut through the cool evening air just as Linda's chosen tow truck operator reached for the winch. The driver froze mid-motion. The neighbors leaned closer behind their curtains, and Linda's flashlight beam trembled ever so slightly. She clutched her clipboard to her chest like a shield, her lips pursed into the thinnest line I'd ever seen. For the first time since her parking crusade began, she wasn't the one holding all the power. But that climax had been building for days. By the second week of her so-called enforcement campaign, Linda had turned the neighborhood into her own personal police state. Every night at dusk, she marched down the street in sneakers and pearls, flashlight in one hand, clipboard in the other. She whispered license plate numbers to herself like sacred incantations, scribbling notes with exaggerated flourishes. If a car so much as kissed the curb past midnight, you could bet she had it logged by sunrise. At first, people laughed. A couple of teens dubbed her Parking Patrol Patty and filmed her muttering into her clipboard like a character out of a mockumentary. But the amusement didn't last. The nightly patrols grew longer, the notes more aggressive. One neighbor told me she saw Linda crouching down to measure bumper overhang with a tape measure. Another swore she tried to peek into a car's glove box to see if it belonged. And all the while, the letters kept coming. Violation notices tucked under wipers. Certified mail addressed to homeowners demanding corrective action. Threats of fines for vehicle clutter. Linda had moved past interpreting bylaws. She was inventing them. And the board, too timid to stand up to her, just nodded along. Of course, my tenants bore the brunt of it. Maria, who rents the little yellow bungalow on the corner, called me nearly in tears. "She taped a notice to my windshield," Maria said, voice shaking. "It says my car is unauthorized, but it's in my lease. I'm allowed to park there." "She's bluffing," I told her. "You've got me as your landlord, not her." "But what if she tows it?" "She won't," I said. "And if she tries, she's in for a surprise." That surprise came sooner than even I expected. It was a Thursday evening, the air thick with the smell of freshly cut grass and barbecue smoke. I was sitting on my porch, sipping an iced tea, when the low rumble of a tow truck echoed down the street. The sight of its orange hazard lights bouncing off the windows was enough to pull every neighbor to the nearest window. And there she was, marching ahead of it like a general leading her troops. The target. Maria's little blue sedan. Linda shined her flashlight on the hood as if blessing the vehicle for removal. The tow driver, a burly guy in a stained t-shirt, hopped out and began unspooling the winch. "This car is in violation," Linda announced, clipboard raised like a warrant. "Proceed." That was my cue. I crossed the street calmly, every eye in the cul-de-sac following me. "Evening," I said to the tow driver. "What's this about?" "Got a call," he grunted, jerking a thumb at Linda. "Said the HOA authorized removal. Said it's unauthorized parking." "Funny," I said, pulling a folded copy of Maria's lease from my pocket, "because this car is authorized. By me, the landlord." Linda scoffed. "Leases don't override HOA rules." "Except when they do," I shot back. "This lease was signed long before your so-called policy. Parking rights are contractual. You tow this car, and you're looking at breach of contract and damages." The tow driver paused, winch still in hand. "Wait, you're the landlord?" "Of every house on this block," I said, making sure the neighbors heard every word. "And none of these leases give the HOA the right to regulate parking." A ripple of whispers spread through the watching crowd. Curtains fluttered. Someone even chuckled. Linda's face flushed crimson. "This is harassment," she snapped. "You're obstructing enforcement." "No," I said, pointing at the lease. "I'm protecting my tenants' rights. You want to test me? Call the county. Call a judge. But I promise you, Linda, the only thing you'll be enforcing is your own humiliation." The tow driver looked between us, then slowly reeled his winch back. "Yeah, I'm not getting involved in this mess," he muttered. He climbed back into his truck, flipped off the hazard lights, and drove away, leaving Linda standing there in the dark, clipboard trembling. The neighbors? They'd never seen her look so powerless. A few even stepped onto their porches, clapping softly like it was the end of a play. Linda turned on her heel and stormed off, pearls swinging, flashlight beam darting wildly across the pavement. It should have ended there, but I know her type. Losing in public only makes them more dangerous in private, and sure enough, the very next morning, a new letter appeared in every mailbox. Emergency HOA meeting. Mandatory attendance. Topic: revised fee structure for vehicle regulation. Linda hadn't given up. She was doubling down. And this time, she wasn't just going after my tenants. She was coming directly for me. "Ladies and gentlemen, as the majority homeowner, I hereby vote down this fee and every other rule you've tried to weaponize against me." You could hear the collective gasp all the way down the hall. The board members froze mid-motion, their pens hovering over the sign-in sheet like it had suddenly turned radioactive. Linda's face drained of color, then flushed an angry crimson as she sputtered, binder clutched tight against her chest. The neighbors shifted in their folding chairs, murmuring like an audience that had just realized the play wasn't going the way the director intended. It was the showdown I'd been waiting for, but it didn't happen overnight. Ever since Linda's failed tow truck stunt, the air in the neighborhood had been buzzing with unease. She tried to reassert control the very next morning, stuffing every mailbox with a new emergency meeting notice. The subject line alone, revised fee structure for vehicle regulation, was enough to raise eyebrows. But the fine print made it worse. Every household would be billed monthly for each car over 2. No exemptions, no appeals. It was a naked power grab, and everyone knew it. Still, fear has a way of silencing people. Most residents were too exhausted or intimidated to push back. That's why, when Tuesday night rolled around, the community center was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it. The room smelled of burnt coffee and Lysol, the kind of scent cocktail that makes you want to hold your breath. Metal folding chairs screeched against the tile as neighbors shuffled in, some glaring, others resigned. At the head table sat Linda, pearls glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights, her binder stacked high with papers. The board members flanked her like nervous sidekicks, their faces betraying none of the confidence she radiated. She opened the meeting with her usual theatrical flourish. "We are here tonight," she declared, voice sharp as glass, to preserve the integrity and value of our community. Parking abuse has spiraled out of control. The board has determined that new fees are necessary to protect us all from declining standards. A murmur rippled through the room. I caught Maria's eye from the second row. She looked ready to bolt. Another neighbor shook his head, muttering something under his breath. That's when Linda laid down her hammer. Effective immediately. All households will be billed $50 per additional vehicle each month. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines, and if necessary, liens. The word liens cracked through the crowd like thunder. People shifted uncomfortably. A few even clapped nervously, as if applauding would make the storm pass faster. And then I stood. "Actually," I said, loud enough to cut through the whispers, "that motion won't be passing tonight." All heads swiveled. Linda's glare found me like a spotlight. "Excuse me?" I walked slowly down the aisle, the manila folder tucked under my arm feeling heavier than bricks. "See, there's a little detail you seem to have overlooked in your crusade." Linda crossed her arms. "Whatever stunt you're about to pull, it won't change the board's decision." I smiled. "Funny you should say that, because technically I am the board's decision." The room erupted in confused murmurs. The board members looked at each other, shifting nervously. I set the folder on the head table, opened it, and fanned out a series of property deeds across the cheap laminate surface. "These," I said, tapping the papers, "are the deeds to every house on this block. I own them, all of them, which makes me not just a homeowner, but the majority homeowner. And under your own bylaws, majority ownership carries majority voting rights." The silence that followed was delicious. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, the squeak of someone shifting in their chair, even the distant sound of a kid's basketball thumping outside. Linda leaned forward, eyes blazing. "This is absurd. You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted. "And I have. Which means every motion, every vote, every fine you think you're passing tonight, dead on arrival." The board members looked pale, like someone had yanked the rug out from under them. One of them, a timid man with a mustache, cleared his throat. "He's right. It's in the bylaws. Majority ownership controls the vote." The room exploded. Some neighbors cheered outright, others laughed in disbelief. Maria let out a relieved gasp. For the first time, Linda wasn't the queen commanding the room. She was just another person caught in the tide. She slammed her binder shut. "You think this makes you powerful? You think this makes you better than the rest of us?" I leaned in, lowering my voice so only she, and the front row, could hear. "No, Linda. It just makes me your boss." Her eyes widened, and for once she had no words. She grabbed her binder and stormed out, pearls clacking against each other as she disappeared through the double doors. The neighbors clapped, some rising to their feet. The board members looked dazed, half relieved to be free of her shadow, half terrified of what came next. And me? I just stood there, hands resting on the deeds, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Because Linda's downfall wasn't the end of the story. With her gone, the HOA wasn't leaderless. It was mine. And while I had no intention of becoming the dictator she had been, I knew better than anyone. Power changes people. The question wasn't whether Linda would try to come back. The question was whether I could keep the neighborhood from falling into the same trap she'd set.